So we'll work through the second tablet on one slide, commandments 4 through 6, and then we'll do commandments 7 through 10. Now the difference between these two tablets is, the first one you recall, it was the fundamental duty of God to man. This tablet is the fundamental duty of man to other men. Okay, so this is between men. The fundamental duty of man to other men. How should we act, and what do we owe each other? Now everything about this is going to be me trying to explain various words up there. Please do not interpret it that if you write down what's on the board that it is sufficient. All right? So the first commandment, honor your mother and your father. I can share with you, quite frankly, that up until I read about these and understood them better, I never thought I broke this. I really thought, I don't go around and make up stuff about my parents. I don't ridicule them. So I figured that, therefore, I wasn't breaking the fourth commandment. There's a lot other things that fall underneath this. Okay, one little bit of, it might be trivial, but I can see it showing up on a true or false question, this is the only commandment that's stated positively. Notice this is not thou shalt not. This is you shall honor your mother and your father. That's interesting. I don't know what you can make of it, but it's a nice little tidbit. So let me talk about what I mean by requiring obedience. All right. When I say and by the way, this is the stuff that's going to show up on quizzes, so make sure you're getting it, right? When I say you require obedience, you should do whatever you're reasonably asked to do. End of story, right? If you're sitting there and your mom says, would you mind running the vacuum? You should run the vacuum. Okay? That's being obedient to your parents. Do the dishes. Being obedient to your parents. Raking the leaves. They say, can you rake the leaves? Or matting up against the house or whatever. That's what you should do to be obedient to your parents. This doesn't stop when you're emancipated, when you are past high school, college age. You better take care of your parents in their old age. And I mean that. And I can talk very personally on that. The reality is I'm told that my generation is known as the sandwich generation. We're taking care of adult children. I'm taking care of adult parents. I don't think there should be any complaint about that. No sour grapes, well, why us? In one way, this is honoring your parents, right? So we brought my mother into my home. She's not going to a nursing home. We gave her high-level care. I'm not patting myself on the back. It was not easy, right? And I was glad to do it. I don't think you should, and I'm not talking about nursing homes because my wife works at one in the evening. I don't think somebody should be in a nursing home if they don't have to be in a nursing home. They'd be much more comfortable with you. Growing up in my neighborhood, sometimes there were 2 or 3 generations living in a house. I remember my buddy Nicky Montecalvo. You go in there and his grandfather was like on a bed in the living room, right? But I've also had friends that told me, quite frankly, we put this person in a home because you take them home and changes your entire lifestyle. Yes, it does, and it should. If it puts your life on hold for 5 years, good. Because they put their life on hold a lot longer than that for you, right? So I don't mean to talk stern about it, but that's part of honoring your parents, both ends of the spectrums. It doesn't stop simply because you are going to be emancipated. Gratitude. When I say gratitude, I know that we know what that means per se, but I want to say that I want you to understand there's a readiness to show appreciation. In other words, if your parents cooked a good meal, they worked all day, cooked a good meal, why are they asking you to help with the dishes? You should be ready to do that. That shows your gratitude. If you're walking in the house and leaves are getting kicked in every time you come in, why do you have to be told to go do it? Go rake it. They work hard too. So this gratitude with our parents has to do with a readiness to show appreciation. So you should already be picking up on how this affected me. All of a sudden, I'm thinking, oh my God, I really don't honor my mother and father, right? This is how I started thinking. What's next? Responsibilities. You're a member of a family. That means you have responsibilities. That doesn't mean that you don't live in an inn and have a maid and somebody to make your bed and a chef to cook for you. You have responsibilities. So there are things that you should be doing in that house just because you're part of the family. Now, this is my personal interpretation. I'm not going to tell you whether or not allowances are good. I'm not going to tell you whether or not you should be paid for chores. But I will tell you at my house, I paid nobody anything to do what is expected of them. You want to vacuum? You vacuum because you should vacuum. Do you like living in a house? You're doing the dishes. I'm not paying you to do dishes. You ate, didn't you? You know, I had friends that didn't do that. They would put like things on the refrigerator. Of course, the kids were younger. If you do the dishes, it's 25 cents. If you vacuum, that's 30 cents. There's no way. You know, now that being said, if my daughters came to me, which they did, I really need 30 bucks. I want to go out on my date or whatever and do this. I didn't just give it to them. I said, well, you want to do something? I mean, I give them something at least. That way I knew that they were willing to at least, you know, it didn't add up to $30, but it was token, right? So that's my view. But the church says you have responsibilities in your family. You need to carry them out. If you don't carry out your responsibilities, then that's breaking this commandment. Now, family central. That all concerns the family. But here's where else you need to go with this commandment. This really extends to any subordinate position. You guys are students and I'm the teacher. What does that mean? That means that all of those things I are required in goodness to give me. If I'm asking something reasonable of you to take notes and not disrupt my class, that's your responsibility. You should do that. All right? If you don't do it, that falls under this commandment. You should be willing to show appreciation for the things that I do extra. Okay, I'm not trying to butter up, but that's part of this, right? Same thing with responsibilities. Your responsibilities as students. You're supposed to be studying. You're supposed to be taking notes. You're supposed to, be participating. If you're not doing that, consider it to fall into this commandment. I'm not out of the woods. I'm a worker. I work here. I have to have a certain obedience to the administration. If they ask something of me that's sensible, I shouldn't be questioning it. Just do it. I'm an employer. I like to be a good employee because I knew what it was like to have good employees, right? I should show my gratitude and appreciation for the things that they are doing for me, right? Like in this school, the one thing we cannot complain about as teachers is the PTO. They are wonderful. They make us a meal once every month. I mean, it's a breakfast. I mean, it looks like you're going to Shady Maple. Like, it's extraordinary. It's just parents, right? I should go out of my way to show appreciation for that. Responsibilities. Our responsibilities as teachers, to be consistent with your grading, to be fair, to get them up in time. I need to carry those responsibilities. If I don't, I'm breaking this commandment. This goes all the way. You talk about citizens in a country, right? So anytime you're in this position of a subordinate to something else, it falls beneath this commandment. So here's what I want you to do. You guys that are Catholic and go to confession, the next time you go to confession, pull these out of your notes and then go through and find out where you're missing the mark and write it down. Could you imagine going in and instead of giving the childlike list, I disobeyed my parents 3 times, I lied twice, why not go in there and say, I don't think I was very responsible with how I was helping my parents at home. I also don't think that I was gracious for all the things they've done for me. I think I've taken advantage of them. The priest is going to say, wow, that's very mature. And you're going to be a better person of it, all right? That's what this is all about, okay? It's not about trying to make us feel guilty. It's about us ferreting out where we're missing the mark. All right, anyway, any questions on Commandment 4? Commandment 5, you shall not kill. This means murder. Doesn't mean killing. This isn't about soldiers justifiably killing somebody or even police people, right? This is murder. Underneath this would be procured abortions. Okay, now I'm using the word procured because technically miscarriages are abortions, although we call those spontaneous abortions. So next semester we will talk about abortion. I will show you the differences in morality between a spontaneous abortion and one that somebody has literally procured. Now, a miscarriage would only be a sin if somebody forced the miscarriage, right? By drinking, taking drugs, throwing themselves down, things like that. Euthanasia can be direct, indirect, passive, active. We are not to end our own lives. Okay? We are not to end our own lives. Why do people end their own lives? To reduce pain. Is that a good intention? Absolutely. Remember, we don't qualify moral acts strictly by the intention. We get why people are doing it. Okay? Suicide. Yes, suicide is a sin. Is there mental illness issues surrounding it? Absolutely. So then is it not a sin? No, it's still a sin. Think of civil law, right? If somebody murders somebody, but they don't have the right mental capacity, do they not charge them with murder? No, they do charge them with murder. What changes? The sentence, right? The guilt. Like, if you want the big term, we would say morally, we mitigate the culpability. In other words, we change how guilty they are. But we never say that it's good, right? So let's just say suicide's wrong, although there's probably mitigating circumstances, but that's not for us to judge, okay? Abuse of body integrity. This isn't about, is it wrong to have 3 piercings and a tattoo, okay? This is when you know that there are instances and people where they go out of the way to, how can we say, extreme body modification. You guys know there's implants that I didn't even think of before. People like putting implants in their heads and spikes and such. There was a guy I saw on TV that he turned himself cosmetically into a lizard, or leopard. I guess it was a leopard, not a lizard, right? Lizard would have been weird. Leopard was weird enough, right? His whole body was tattooed like a leopard, and he had implants put in. Okay, now is there psychological things behind that? Might be, but we're still saying it's wrong in itself. This would also include, and you might think this never happens, but it does, voluntary amputation, right? Like you might have heard the phrase, a person has a right to their own body. No, you really don't. You chop a finger off, you cut an arm off, they don't just send you home with it, and say, well, okay, it's your body, right? Does this happen? Absolutely. Next semester we'll talk about it because it plays into something morality that I'll be sharing with you. But one video I actually have is a man who said this leg was not his. It was a foreign leg. He literally could not pay nor convince somebody to amputate it. And he didn't know how to do it himself safe-wise. He wound up putting his leg into dry ice until it literally rotted, and then went to the hospital, and then they had to amputate it, right? There's issues with that. Are there psychological issues? Yes, but again, we're not saying that there might not be reasons that mitigate his guilt, but it's still wrong, okay? Not safeguarding peace. This is very important, especially in a high school setting. You guys all know your cliques. You know who you hang around with. You know your friends. You know that you can either make that a peaceful community, or you can make it, what do you want to say, or cause friction. So we have the duty to maintain peace in our little communities, whether it's our family, whether it's our little clique, right? Peace, according to the Catholic Church, is not the absence of conflict. It's not because a couple's not fighting, they're at peace. You know that's not always true. So do you add or do you subtract peace from the communities you're in? That's another thing. Could you imagine going and confessing that? I think I've disrupted my friends. I think I have agitated them to the point where there's friction when we're together, and it's my fault. That's the kind of confessions you got to start hitting, right? Hatred. Why would we include hatred here? Because Jesus Christ did. Jesus Christ said in the Sermon on the Mount, you've heard it said that you shall not kill. I'm telling you, if you hate somebody in your heart, you've already committed murder. Now, you can argue with that, but that's what he said, all right? So if we hold this hatred towards other people in our hearts, wish them dead, metaphorically, that falls under his commandment, okay?
So if you get a tattoo of like the name of a family member or like a cross, is that bad?
No, I don't think so. See, this has changed, and this is culturally, right? You can go back probably to like other cultures, and I'm thinking of anything from like cultures in Africa to probably cultures in Eastern Europe where tattoos were part of the culture, or Asia, right? Now, me growing up, I'll never get piercings or tattoos. Why? Because my entire youth, the only people that had tattoos were Navy guys, or let's just say military, and convicts. Like there were a lot of bars around my house, and they were inns, hotels. They were one-room hotels with a common bathroom. And anybody getting out of prison would go and live in these one-room hotels, and we'd mess with them and stuff. But we'd go up there, and they all had, it was blue tattoos because they'd put them on with toilet paper and needles. So that was my entire impression of what these things were. I know it's not true anymore. I'm still not big on them, but it's not wrong, right? But I do think, though, there are instances where they could be an issue. You guys know, when somebody starts working on tattoos, what do they tend to do? Get sleeves, right? And then it goes from there. I don't know if you're independently wealthy, but is this money being used in the best way? I mean, at some point, that doesn't make it bad, but I think it has to be part of the decision making, But nonetheless, it doesn't make it bad.
Yeah, I also heard that a lot of people say that like when you get a tattoo,
Well, you know, I think that isn't a half bad attitude, but that would be more towards what we would call like spiritual perfection, rather than saying that it's wrong to do. Like I think a person that was really bent on, you know, finding ways to image Christ in his life, it probably wouldn't, you know, come to his thought that maybe I should do a tattoo. Now I know some people get them as memories or commemoration to somebody. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'll give you a very personal opinion on that. And this is only my opinion, right? So there's a kid in my neighborhood who was a nice kid, but he was always in trouble. I'm not even sure he graduated high school. He was, you know, kind of like a rough kid, but a nice kid. And I think his uncle died, or I'm sorry, his dad died. And he came to show me this tattoo that he got in memory of his dad. Now, I wasn't going to belittle him. I wasn't going to diminish what he did. But I told him, I said, I want to tell you something, and I'm talking to you like a dad. I said, if I died and my kids get a tattoo, it wouldn't mean a lot to me. I said, you didn't want to honor your dad? I said, why don't you finish school, get a good job, raise a family, get married once, love that person, raise kids, be good to those kids, and in your old age, look up and say, I did it for you, Dad. Now that would be something. I said, my fear is that these things become enough. You know, like look what I did. You know, now I'm not saying that he won't do those other things, but that really doesn't call it bad. It just says, you know, is it really doing what a person does? But that's my opinion. All right, sixth, you shall not commit adultery. One more time. No way did I think I committed this one. Never slept with a married woman when I was young, so I'm safe. The reality is, I broke this up into two different little aspects for you. One, sins against chastity, and one, sins against self-mastery. Sins against chastity, fornication. What's fornication? Anybody know? You've heard the word before, I take it? What's fornication? No one knows?
Is that sex?
Sex before marriage. Okay? Now, I'm unaware of any Christian denomination that says sex before marriage is good. Although I am certain any two young people having sex before marriage are saying they love each other. But now you have to work out how do you love each other when you're causing a sin. All right? We'll talk about that another time. Homosexual behavior. Voluntary incest. Are you aware that that goes on regularly? There's a phenomena when children are separated from their parents at a young age and they meet later, they become sexually attracted. Psychological phenomena. It probably has to do with that they don't know how else to express love. But I have story after story, and you will read the stories. Daughter and a father. I saw one, a mother and her daughter. One, brother and sister, 2 years apart. In Germany, they're trying to overturn the sanctity law so they can properly be married. And you know what their argument is? We're two consensual adults who love each other. Why won't you let us love each other? That's not like an argument you've heard recently? One period when I said involuntary incest, they all went, oh. You know, that kind of like guttural yuck feeling. You know what I shared with them? When I was your age, 30 years ago, sitting in this classroom, our health teacher was talking about homosexual behavior. Without exception, everybody was like, oh my God, I don't want to think about that. I can't even think about, no, I don't want to think about it. That's how the reaction was. You can say what's right or wrong. That was the reaction. I think most people, if they don't come out and say it, think that way with voluntary incest. But if things don't change with the laws, your children won't think anything of this, just like you don't think anything of homosexual behavior. And as a matter of fact, if you do have a problem with this, they'll probably call you a bigot. Right? So next semester, we're going to have to work it out. Is there anything wrong with this? And if there isn't, then why would there be anything wrong with that? And if there's nothing wrong with that, why would there be anything wrong with this? We'll have to work that out, but that'll be next semester. Adultery. We know what that is. Polygamy. Many wives. Polyamory. Many lovers. I mean, we can go on and on. There's more descriptions now with sexual relations. I can't keep track of them all. Rape. Okay? Forced sexual. For unconsensual sex. By the way, I want to make a little tidbit here again that we'll talk about next semester with abortion. Did you ever hear some people say, I'm against abortion except for the cases of rape or incest? Did you ever wonder why they bring incest into it? What does that have to do with anything? If it's unconsensual, isn't that rape? If it's consensual, then it's this. We're not talking about it's pregnancy, right? They bring it in because it's something to destroy the flavor in the discussions, right? It has no place in it. We could talk about what happens in rape, But rape, incest that was unconsensual is just rape between two people that are closely related, right? It's interesting though why that's always part of the argument. So you have to watch that people don't bring emotionally charged things to try to make a point. Okay, any questions on Commandment 6? All right. Commandment 7, you shall not steal. All right. I used to steal rulers and stuff out of Sister Magdalene's closet, but outside of that, I thought it was pretty good, you know. We didn't have a lot growing up, so I can get extra rulers and pencils. I thought I was scoring, you know. But stealing's wrong. Unjust wage. Some of you guys are going to be in a position to determine what other people get paid in your companies. They need to be paid fairly. I don't think the minimum wage thing would fall underneath this because there are simply, I own a business. It's not the kind of market or the kind of industry that can support $15 an hour for employees. At one time I had 10 employees. If I was forced to pay them all $15 an hour, I guarantee you I'd have 5 employees within a week. You can't do it. Now that being said, when you have CEOs making $4, $5, $30 million, we got issues. Okay, Ben and Jerry's. You guys all know Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Okay, they no longer own it, but when they did, they had made a pledge that they would never receive as a salary more than 9 times of the lowest paid employee. Isn't that something? So if the lowest paid employee made $10, $90 an hour is the most they'd ever take. Now you might think $90 an hour is a lot, but not for CEOs, right? That's extraordinary. I think that's somebody saying we're going to rise everybody together. I give them credit for that, right? It's sort of the Catholic Church.
Did they ever end up saying like how much the CEOs were making like yearly?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, if you hold that ratio,
It's not a lot.
I can't imagine, you know, even if they wind up paying the guy $30 an hour, that's still, I mean, for a guy to make, you know, what would it be, 900, 300, 200, no, God, I can't even think, $280 an hour. That sounds like a lot, but not when you're a CEO of an international company. Yeah, sure. Okay, oppression of the poor. The Catholic Church is very clear. The poor get preferential treatment, okay? This is not communism. We don't take another people in the world and divide it up amongst them. That's communism. This is, we need to find a way to get these people out of their poverty. They need to have a way to seek an upward rise, okay? I'll qualify that in the 10th commandment, but nonetheless, let's leave it there. Universal destination of earthly goods. Here's what the Catholic Church says. You'll need to know what this means. All the goods of the earth were meant for everyone. So we have to have access to things, right? So things like food, shelter, and healthcare are basic human rights from the Catholic Church. Doesn't mean you need a $100 deductible with the best healthcare, but you need access to healthcare, all right? In the ancient world, when the Jews, they had this policy, I don't remember what it was called, but along their traveling routes, their trails, their paths, their roads, people were allowed to own property, just like the Catholic Church says, you should be allowed to own property. And I don't know what the distance is, so I'm making this up. Let's say 20 yards on each side of the road. Whatever was growing there, grain or fruit, it was open. Anybody can use it. That was somebody's property, but so far in, because these things were meant for all people to have access to, there were those who were allowed to go and pluck the fruit, pluck the grain. So when you hear of the apostles walking along and pulling grain, this is not their property, they're not stealing, this is part of them being allowed through the universal destination of earthly goods. All right? Abusing integrity of creation. All right. We've got to watch how we abuse our resources, and we have to also be concerned with pollution. So you do, and I mean all of us, we have to be concerned with how much water do we use at home? What are we using this for? We do have to be concerned with global warming. This isn't a science class, so I'm not going to get in the argument. But I want to give you my opinion on this, and you might agree with me. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. You know, I don't think most people are serious about changing anything. In other words, if you're against global warming, I think good for you. But unless we live differently, what's going to change? If you're living in a house that's 4 times the size you need, you're heating and cooling air that nobody needs. If you have a vacation house, if you're taking exotic vacations, flying all over the place, if you have multiple cars, if you drive everywhere, how much are you using that you don't need to be using? And I don't think I haven't heard a Democrat or Republican say a word about that. What they want is they want things to get reduced, but I haven't heard somebody else come out and say yet we need to live differently, you know? that's my own pet peeve with it, you know? So, like, my mother, I know it was probably an extreme, but she grew up through the Depression, which I know we went through an economic, recession. When my mom heard on the news that this was the worst economic times except for the Depression, she literally started laughing because she knew what the Depression was like. She goes, "How? I'm standing in line for 3 hours to get a piece of cheese? How does that compare with this?" My mother, when she would take a glass of water, and the glasses she would use were the old jelly jars. She'd take a glass of water, she didn't finish it, she put saran wrap and rubber band around it, put it on the kitchen counter, and then she would finish drinking it later. Now, is that excessive? Not for somebody who doesn't want to waste. I mean, if you think about it, why are you throwing it down the drain? I mean, just leave it. You're going to drink it eventually, right? So, I mean, now that might be extreme, but if we even lived reasonably, would we have the pollution we have? Probably not. I got a golden ticket. Not a problem. Oh, okay, not a problem. Okay. That's it. Various economic issues. We'll leave it at that. All right. Hopefully we can get through these. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. All right. We have the duty to not misrepresent the truth, or we also have a positive duty to give the truth in its wholeness. All right? What do I mean by this? Let me try to be nonpartisan. The one thing, I don't care if you liked who got elected or didn't, I think everybody's on the same page when it comes down to saying cable news just never gives it to you straight, right? So let me pick two people so that you know I'm not partisan on this. Does a person like Sean Hannity say the truth? I think he does. I don't think he gives you all the truth. He gives you the truth that works for whatever he's trying to say. Okay, that was the Republican side. Rachel Maddow, does she speak the truth? I think she does. I don't think she gives you all the truth. I think she gives you the truth that makes her points. That's an issue, all right? That's an issue. So we can't, in our lives, just use the truth that fit our particular agendas or ideologies. To do that is misrepresenting the truth or not presenting it properly, and it's sin against the 8th commandment. Lying, we know what lying is. It's telling a falsehood. You know what perjury is? Anybody know what perjury is? What's the difference between perjury and lying? Yes?
Perjury is lying under oath.
It's lying under oath. Good. Make sure you know that, right? So because you're under oath, this raises the, bless you. This raises, what do you want to say? Raises the bar. Rash judgment. Remember when we did what did we do? The gifts of the Holy Spirit. And I said, what was the opposite of counsel, right? Rash judgment. So if you're not properly seeking the right thing to do, and you run into stuff, it could be hazardous, right? That it falls under this commandment. Do we know what detraction and calumny is? They're close but different. And you'll need to know these things. These are all going to show up in matching, I guarantee it. Detraction is when I try to, I'm malicious about somebody's character, but it's like a truth. Okay, let me explain. You don't know, I'm making this person up, he's fictional. I have a friend, Joe. You don't know Joe, but I'm telling you about Joe. Joe's an alcoholic, and sometimes he hits his wife and his kids. Okay, now, if Joe came to me and said, "Why did you say that?" I might say, "It was the truth, I didn't make it up. You are an alcoholic, you do hit them." But I had no business telling you. You see, I'm relaying something, only trying to misalign his character. You have no business to know that, right? So it's kind of like gossiping, like if somebody got caught cheating and you started telling everybody else, that's detraction. Well, he did. It's not up to you to share that, okay? That person has no right to that information. That's detraction. Calumny is the same thing, but it's a falsehood. Hey, you don't want to go out with her, man. If you hear the stuff she did and the people she's with, you're making it up. You're misaligning that person's character with a falsehood, okay? So they're both similar, but one has to do with whether or not it's based on a truth, and the other one has to do whether or not it's a falsehood. Boasting, I know we know what it is, but let's at least leave it to say that it is excessive pride. If you are the fastest kid on the track team, good for you. You don't need to share that with everybody. You're the smartest kid in the class, good for you. That is good for you, but don't need to share with everybody, okay? So, any questions on 8? All right, we got to finish here. 2 more. I'm going to confess to you right up front, when I was your age, I had no clue what that meant whatsoever. Coveting my neighbor's wife? Somebody earlier said they thought it meant like covering her. You know? I didn't laugh because I said I didn't know what it meant. Covet? I'm going to take her? Take her where? I'm thinking like hostages, you know, I have no idea. So what does it fall under? Now, first of all, this is different than adultery. The 6th commandment, the way I'm giving it to you, and you'll need to know this, the 6th commandment has to do with the act. This one has to do with the desire, okay? So, to lust after somebody but not act on it really is a sin against the 9th commandment, not the 6th. By the way, does anybody have a question as to why that says covet your neighbor's wife? Is it okay to do the men? The reason is, and there's no way to say this except to say it straight, in the ancient world, women were property. So a man did not commit adultery by taking another woman that wasn't his wife, because it was property. Okay, now, we don't understand it that way. This goes both ways. We leave the wording, but we understand this goes both ways. Also, that should give you insight. Every Protestant church except Lutherans combine our 9th and 10th into the 10th commandment. So their 10th commandment is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or goods. Okay? That's one commandment for them. The Catholic Church has split it, primarily to emphasize the distinction. Okay? So lust of the flesh. This would be desiring somebody that's inappropriate. Custody of the eyes. I want to share something here because ever since I was a kid, my mom told me this. When I got married, my mother-in-law told me this. And then I saw my one daughter, who happens, ironically, to be in philosophy, does the same thing. My wife calls it a dead stare. My mother-in-law calls it a stupid stare, you know. My daughter, when she's thinking, she could be looking at the back of somebody's head or a penny on the ground. She doesn't see either of them, but she's just like thinking, okay? And then after a while, I don't know if anybody does that. Then after a while, and my wife is very good with me. She knows me. We'll be at the mall or something, and I'm just sitting there looking. She's like, stop it, you're staring at somebody. Oh, I didn't realize it, you know? Okay.
And,
My wife's good with that.
It happens.
My wife's good with that. Here's what this means. Custody of the eyes is, have you ever heard the term undressing people with your eyes? Okay, that's what we're talking about here, all right? So this is that stare where you are, you know, there's a fantasy involved, right? Now, could it be innocent? Sure. Priests are taught, literally, to watch the custody of their eyes. They're taught that in seminary. Because even if they might see a girl that has a nice outfit on, I mean, there's nothing, you know, sexual to, hey, that's really, look at that outfit. But they know how that can be interpreted. So they tell them, just don't watch how long your eyes are somewhere. Even if it's totally innocent, it's hard to explain, right? That's not what we're really talking about here. We're talking about when we undress others with our eyes, right? A fantasy type thing. Pride of life. Here's the bottom line. Everything you do in this life, all the things that you have are gifts. You really are not accomplishing anything except the things that God has given you to work with, right? Immodesty. I'm not going to say anything about this except other people in the other classes have told me they too have seen on Facebook, the internet, YouTube, these stories about how in the last 5 to 10 years, Halloween costumes have all gotten like sexy. You know, superhero costumes went from, you know, cape and everything to skin tight, belly showing, you know, which, I mean, there's something there. Now, there's an issue. Jealousy and envy. Here's what I want you to know the difference between these. Jealousy is, I don't want you to have what's mine. Jealousy is, I don't want you to take what's mine. So God, that's why we can say God is jealous for you. Envy is, I want what's yours. But there's something else. With envy, there's like a knife twist. And I hope there's a misfortune for you, right? So think in this term. Think if like you like this girl, but she's dating that guy. You can't have her. You envy her, but you can't have her, so you hope they at least break up. Little kids playing with blocks, right? If one kid won't let the other kid play with his block and he keeps saying no, no, what does that kid try to do? Well, what does he try to do with that block?
He's gonna throw it and knock down.
Yeah, knock him over. If I can't play, neither can you. That's envy. Jealousy is don't take what's mine. Okay? Jealousy is don't take what's mine. All right, could we do it? Coveting your neighbor's goods. Greed. Power, prestige, and fame. Or power, prestige, and money, I should say. You can be greedy on all of those. It's not just money. It could be the power that you want. It could be the notoriety you want. Amassing earthly wealth. The church says you should live a dignified life. Money besides that, you should be doing good with it. Don't give it to the government, you do it. Envy, that's that malicious one. You know what that is. I want to real quick say something about unnecessary benefits. We have, the Catholic Church is against trickle-down economics, not in theory, but because it doesn't work. The Catholic Church is against the welfare state, not that they think it's wrong to help the poor, but because they become dependent on it. So my mother-in-law, who was, give me 2 minutes here, my mother-in-law who worked in a ribbon factory upstate, the company moved south to Mexico, they were left without a job. So the state comes in, and the state says, we're going to retrain you. She goes and gets retrained as a medical assistant for 9 months. There's a girl next to her that was on her phone the whole time, never took notes. She said to her, aren't you worried about not passing? She goes, no. This is my 4th time taking this. I haven't passed yet. I don't want to pass. They'll keep paying until, as long as you're here, and as long as you don't have to work. That's an issue. That's an issue. So when people take benefits, when you have 2 or 3 generations on welfare, there's something else going on there. All right? So taking things that aren't necessarily necessary for us to move on, that would fall underneath the 10th commandment.